For 60 years, comedy icon Don Rickles made people laugh, but his family kept quiet about the true story. His daughter Mindy eventually broke in 2024. That quiet, everyone who believed they know the mister was stunned by what she disclosed. The affection behind the taunts, the threats from the mob were serious. The household tragedies exceeded everyone's expectations. He was almost crushed by the remorse he held over the loss of his son. We're revealing the sinister secrets that Don Rickles carried to his grave today, and it took his family so long to come clean. In May, Don Rickles was born. Jackson Heights, Queens, August 8, 1926. His parents immigrated from Israel. His mother, Etta, was the daughter of Austrian Jews, while his father, Max, was from Lithuania. Their house was crowded with tales of the ancient world. Although difficult, life was full of vitality. They exchanged words. They observed Orthodox Jewish customs and spoke Yiddish at the table. Don grew up listening to tales of adversity, conflict, and survival. He was taught early on how to find amusement in suffering. Later on, that would form the core of his comedy. At New Don wasn't an excellent student at Town High School. Despite his subpar marks, he stood out in different ways. He was elected as the Theatrical Society's president. Instructors saw that even if he didn't illuminated the stage, study a lot, he ridiculed both professors and fellow students. Directly in front of them, he was referred to as the Clown Prince by everyone. He received his degree. Dodd received what he described as a war diploma during World War II, which was intended to encourage young men into the armed forces. He was able to make his crazy comedy work even in a disciplined school. Don enlisted in the Navy at the age of 18 from 1943 to 1946. He was in service in the Pacific. He served aboard the USS Siren, a vessel that provided assistance for torpedo boats. It was unbearably hot, though the work was challenging, and danger was never far away. Don made a joke about the staff buying decaying due to the moisture. However, his humor helped people deal with that suffering. His shipmates recalled how his jokes made them feel better. When Don retired from the Navy, he had mastered the transform your fear into amusement. He used that as his weapon for the remainder of his life. He attempted something more sturdy at home. He was encouraged by his father to become a salesperson for insurance. Don dressed in a suit and tried it out. However, it was unsuccessful. He was unable to sell. His sense of humor didn't match door-to-door sales. He detested it when people slammed doors on him. That failure broke him, but it also forced him to discover his actual course. His merged him to pursue his happiness. He was able to escape the usual post-war grind thanks to such support. Don began attending the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in 1948. It was a large step. He trained with future celebrities like Jason Rhodes and Grace Kelly. However, he didn't like drama. People laughed at his somber parts, and not in a positive manner. Nevertheless, when he was permitted to perform humorous roles or ad-lib, everything came together. He came to see that it was actually a wonderful thing if he failed at drama. That setback enabled him to discover what he really was destined to do. He was able to explore a completely new genre of comedy thanks to the Academy. Early in the 1950s, in the Catskill Mountains, Don began performing. It required cash, and those work was available in modest resorts. The crowds were near the stage and enjoyed making fun of others. He was yelled at in the middle of a performance one night. Rather, Don retorted that they were being ignored. Quick, scathing jokes were his way of insulting them. The audience burst out laughing. Everything changed at that point. His cold, severe fashion was not only accepted, but adored. After that, he relied into it. Despite hecklers, he remained unflinching. He took them in his arms and made them a segment of the program. The term hockey puck also originated at the same time. In the seedy nightclubs of Miami and New York, Don wanted a light-hearted jab that wouldn't result in a punch. He began referring to people as hockey pucks as a result. It did not made logic, yet it was amusing. The phrase stuck because people laughed. After several years, when the script even mentioned that he provided the voice of Mr. Potato Head in Toy Story because of those crazy early adopters, that one dumb remark became ingrained in popular culture. Displays. Don gave nearly constant performances between 1950 and 1970. He performed mostly in clubs, strip establishments, dilapidated lounges, and even Moburn night spots were avoided. He occasionally performed 3 shows per night, 7 days a week. The audiences were frequently impolite, inebriated, or outright hazardous. Don, however, persisted. He and his abilities. He quickly learned how to silence hecklers. Additionally, each and every insult he made during those years influenced the performance that would eventually fill Vegas theaters and launch him into national television. His stage armor was constructed by the demanding crowds. One evening, and knew that almost went too far, Jersey. Don was going about his daily business when he noticed in the crowd were a man and his spouse. He joked about how big she was, likening her to a moose. He was unaware of the man's ties to the mob though the room fell silent. Don was summoned backstage after the performance. He was terrified by the worst, but the man offered him drinks and laughed. It was dangerous, but at times as that was incorporated into Don's mythology. He showed no fear, even when he most likely not supposed to be. Don Rickles had been attempting to gain recognition for almost 2 decades. He was 32 years old when he won his first movie role in 1958 with Run Silent, Run Deep. In real life, that age could have been acceptable, but he was already falling behind in Hollywood. The majority of actors his age were re-established, but Rickles had more than a supporting part. He ended up on film alongside Burt Lancaster and Clark Gable. During World War II, he served as a submarine's quartermaster. A somber film. Rickles succeeded without any humor or jokes. He produced a performance that felt more like someone who belonged on TV with legends than a nightclub act. He shocked crowds and altered his course. At last he made his debut in the world that only imagined as a child in Queens. The situation took an odd turn. In the 1960s, Rickles was trapped in a sequence of films that featured just the sun, sand and nonsense. Movies like Bikini Beach and Muscle Beach Party looked like fun they almost destroyed his career. But first, they were harmless pleasure and easy money. He played silly adult roles when he was surrounded by teens who were dancing and surfing. Reviewers detested the movies. Directors no longer thought he was capable of handling more serious or even intense parts. The spouse of his agent, Annette Funicello, one of he kept appearing in these beach movies. Thanks to the stars. They were foolish, and not in a positive way, but many laughed. Years later, Barbara Bush continued to make fun of Rickles for those parts during a dinner at the White House like adhesive. They adhered to him. He added humor to them, indeed, but it nearly cost him everything. When it appeared that Rickles might be stuck in goofy parts indefinitely, he took Atone to the left. He starred in an odd little science fiction movie in 1963, X, The Man with the X-Ray Eyes is the title. Starring and directed by Roger Corman, the film directed by Ray Milland, has great concepts but a modest budget. Rickles performed a carnival vendor attempting to profit off a man who was able to see right through everything. He was not a joker. He did not participate in the game for amusement. He took action, and it succeeded. The movie became popular among sci-fi admirers and offered Rickles a fresh form of recognition. For the first time, individuals stat he was capable of handling more somber, dismal content. He was no longer merely the loud-suited humorous man. In Enter Laughing, a comedy about a young man, was directed by Carl Reiner in 1967. Attempting to pursue a career in acting. In a brief role, Rickles played a tough-talking actor, Harry Hamburger, a coach. Although he didn't appear on screen for very long, people listened. He had the ideal timing. He delivered his lines with force. Detractors claimed that his scenes were among the greatest in the movie. It was his first serious attempt. He did a fantastic job at comedy on the big screen. At last, he was able to present the film. Audiences the same enchantment he had performed for years in nightclubs. The movie didn't make him well-known, but it brought him closer. Next in line were Kelly's Heroes. 1970. Everything altered as a result. There were several stars in the cast. Clint Eastwood, Donald Sutherland, Telly Savalas. Rickles, however, held his own. He performed A Crap Game, a sardonic supply sergeant, almost stole the entire movie. It was a war film, but a unique one. It had attitude, movement, and humor. Rickles' gregarious, money-hungry persona was ideal. The film eventually became a cult classic after becoming a hit. Rickles was suddenly more than simply a comic in Vegas or a guest on talk shows. He was a legitimate Hollywood performer. Behind Rickles' entire career was shaped by one daring moment in the scenes. It took place in the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas. Frank Sinatra, the most influential performer, was having supper in America. Rickles, who was largely unknown at the time, was I'll sooner date there. He requested a favor from Sinatra in an attempt to win the woman over, approach and pretend to be longtime pals. Sinatra concurred. However, when Rickles didn't thank him when he walked up to the table. Rather, he dismissed him with a wave. And not now, Frank, he said. I'm with someone. Don't you see that? Sinatra had the option to. He chuckled, but it crushed him for that. After that evening, Sinatra adopted Rickles. Beneath his wing, he was soon nicknamed Bullethead by Sinatra. It wasn't an insult. It indicated that Rickles had merited a place in his world. Sinatra said, named after a 1957 stage scene. Rickles noticed Sinatra among the crowd. And make yourself at home, Frank, he urged. Everyone froze, but Sinatra joked, hit somebody. He enjoyed the guts of Rickles. No one touched him again. Rickles could say anything, even to the most violent individuals, and escape punishment. Sinatra kept him safe, similar to family. However, safety was not always synonymous with protection. April 6, 1972, Rickles was in New York, playing at the Copacabana. Joey Gallo, the mob boss, was present among the crowd. Gallo was attempting to regain his influence after being released from prison. He was roasted by Rickles. Shouted out his prison term, his reputation, and everything else from the platform. Backstage friends were in a panic. They implored him to halt. Rickles, however, continued. Gallo remained silent. He even chuckled. The threat was real, though. Later on that Gallo invited Rickles to Umberto's Clam House for a birthday meal that evening. No, answered Rickles. Perhaps he was exhausted. Perhaps he sensed something. The eatery was attacked by a mob a few hours later. Struck. More than 20 rounds were fired by the gunman who broke in. Gallo passed away before his family. Rickles would have attended that dinner if he had accepted the invitation. He might have been slain. That particular one making the choice to forego a late-night dinner could have prevented his death. Even though Rick continued to perform as he grew older, he appeared on stage at Ronald Reagan's second inauguration of Reagan as president. Despite being a Democrat all his life, he went at Sinatra's request. Rickles roasted presidents that evening. Cabinet members and famous people, as he always had. There was nothing wrong. Boundaries. Politics didn't interest him. The crowd was important to him, and the throng cherished him. Don Rickles was not merely a guest on Johnny Carson's program at the A stage in a manner that revolutionized late-night television. Between the late 1960s and he appeared more than 100 times in the 1980s. He was scheduled at times, at times he simply stepped in and took charge. Carson thought it was fantastic. He did not merely put up with he took Rickles' jabs well. What most careers could have ended Rickles as a superstar. On one occasion, Carson even let him to host while he was the guest. It worked since the two shared a unique quality. Carson was cool and collected. Rickles was quick and loud. Every visit seemed new because of their chemistry. The viewers, when they heard the bullfight music, they knew what was going to happen. Rickles would leave, all set to fire. The Tonight Show is now a must-watch for more because of those instances. Over 10 years. Rickles was stepping in as host in 1976 when something insignificant becomes a memorable event. The wooden object that Johnny Carson had package of cigarettes. Since 1967 it had been on Carson's desk. The following evening when Carson returned, Hugh was perplexed. He then learned that Rickles had done it, so he gathered a crew of cameras and strolled over to Rickles' new show's adjacent set. Carson stormed in. While they were filming and directly challenged him, it was impromptu and unpolished. Rickles got through it by making jokes. Carson acted like he was angry. The instant turned to become one of the talk show's most often replayed segments. It was more than just amusing. It was a novel experience. It blurred the distinction between shows and included the host-inth narrative. It was unlike anything viewers had ever seen. Rickles excelled at variety events, and live performances were one thing, but comedies were another. In 1968, he received a variety show of his own. It was short-lived. He made another attempt in 1972, the same title, updated format. He portrayed an ad executive in a pre-written sitcom this time. However, it was just 13 episodes long. In a controlled environment, Rickles was unable to shine. He required freedom in his comedy. He was slowed down by the texts. Critics and audience. Rickles' unique spark didn't function within the confines of a comedy. However, something significant was revealed by those failures. Not every performer is suited for sitcoms. They perform best when they are free to be who they are. Rickles' utilization in subsequent programs was influenced by that lesson. Then CPO Sharkey arrived. IT offered Rickles a TV home after airing from late 1976 until spring 1978. The program placed him in a Navy environment, similar to his actual World War II experience. Presented Chief Otto Sharkey, a man who yelled abuses but genuinely showed concern for his team. Characters from a variety of ethnic backgrounds made up the cast. Rickles made light of everything, or if they did it with a peculiar tenderness. Though the humor was too edgy for the time, particularly in punk rock-related episodes, yet it was successful. Rickles could be who he was. The framework of sitcoms did not confine him. The 37 episodes made up the show's run. Although it wasn't a huge success, it demonstrated that with their Rickles could lead a series with the correct setup. From 1973 through 1984, Rickles discovered yet another ideal fit, the celebrity roasts of Dean Martin. He didn't simply participe, he exerted dominance. The concept was straightforward. Famous people were burnt by their companions, but Rickles set the standard higher. He was quick, nimble, and unafraid. On that stage sat everyone, from Ronald Reagan to Bob Hope. They occasionally listened to Rickles when he spoke anxiously. Frank Sinatra was one of the most well-known roasts. Rickles went hard, notwithstanding the presence of mafia figures in the audience. Their breath was held until Sinatra chuckled. That chuckle gave everyone else permission to chuckle as well. Rickles even mocked Dean Martin himself in 1976. In front of movie stars like John Wayne and Orson Welles. Over the past 10 years, these specials had afforded a lot of scripted shows. Rickles turned into the person that everyone desired. For roasting, you had succeeded if he offended you. Rickles Don spent years using his razor-sharp wit and unabashed comedy to make people laugh. However, off-stage, his tale was replete with that few people ever saw, devastating loss, and quiet affection. In his life completely transformed in 1965 after he met Barbara Claudot at the age of 38, he was still looking for something genuine. She wasn't impressed by his notoriety or his taunts. He was caught when she didn't find his jokes funny. Caught off guard. It drew him in. 2. She was different from the others. She was at ease, honest, and well-founded. His candor allowed him to abandon the act and be himself at last. The date of their marriage was March 14, 1965. They were hardly separated for the next 52 years. Barbara supported him through the tumultuous world of entertainment and brought up 2 kids with him, Mindy and Laurie. On stage, Don frequently made jokes about her, but in private, he referred to her as the center of his existence. She went on tour with him. She changed her itinerary for Dana's and stood by him through it all. Following his passing in 2017, Chevin took control of his Twitter account in order to preserve his voice for his followers. However, deep pain was also a part of their love journey. On May 12, Larry, their son, was born. 1970. He produced the HBO series continuing his father's career in entertainment, the 2007 Emmy-winning documentary Mr. Forewarned, The Don Rickles Project. People believed he was simply getting big in. Then Larry unexpectedly passed away from pneumonia on December 3, 2011. Hugh was just 41. Barbara and Don were devastated. According to friends, they were shattered by the defeat. Don, who was in his 80s already, saw it as a wound that never recovered completely. The story became much more terrible 10 years later, after battling non-Hodgkin's disease. Barbara died on March 14, 2021, at the age of 84. Lymphoma. Their wedding anniversary fell on that very day. They had been 56 years of marriage today. The timing startled fans and friends. It seemed like the last line in a love tale that has experienced both happiness and heartache. Barbara was more than just the wife of Don Rickles. In every aspect of his life, she was his companion. Yet their relationship endured despite time like very few couples in Hollywood ever do. Don had a different side that didn't appear in his normal environment, merely in front of the camera. In 1995, when he was cast in Casino, people were taken aback. The film, which was a violent criminal drama with serious themes, was directed by starring Robert De Niro, Sharon Stone, and Joe Pesci. It was directed by Martin Scorsese. Rickles wasn't a dramatic actor, he was a comedian. Scorsese had already warned him when filming began. De Niro was serious and focused on his work. Rickles didn't give a damn. Despite this, he made jokes. De Niro was renowned for his unwavering personality even in between takes. He remained quiet and concentrated. However, Rickles didn't abide with those guidelines. De Niro was seen smoking a cigarette in silence in one shot, increasing the level of tension. Rickles was powerless to stop himself. Suddenly he yelled, "Will you say the darn lines, please? Almost 6 o'clock has arrived. I must go home," the crew exclaimed. Don't giggling. De Niro broke too. It wasn't the only occasion, however. Rickles shouted, "Get somebody that can talk for Christ's sake," and lambasted him during a subsequent take. To portray Mr. Potato Head in the recently released animated movie Toy Story, it was Pixar's debut film, and nobody was sure if it would succeed. Rickles had never before provided the voice of a cartoon character. He was accustomed to smoky clubs and live audiences, not recording studios. John, the director, Lacia, arrived at Rickles' residence with a Mr. Potato Head toy. When Rickles pulled the door open, the bits of the toy fell off. Rickles' head appeared to Lacia like a potato as well. The ice was broken at that moment. Rickles consented to give it a try. Initially, although it felt odd at first, he quickly began to inject the character with his wry humor in a way that no one else could. Millions of children were now giggling at quotes from a man who had previously roasted they didn't know who Frank Sinatra was. What shocked Rickles even more was the response of his own grandchildren. Harrison, Mann, and Ethan had grown up with Pixar films. They had personally witnessed their grandfather's performance. They were aware he has appeared on television since the 1950s and performed in movies with Joe Pesci. However, Mr. Potato Head was more important to them than all of that. That person now is the one they liked most. His daughter Mindy said that was the first time they ever thought of their grandfather as something special, greater than life. In 2010, they attended the Toy Story 3 premiere, and it turned into among the family's most treasured memories. According to Mindy, the job didn't simply make her father as once more well-known, he became memorable as a result, and he wasn't in their home. Pop was the sardonic potato, just Don Rickles. What began as a one movie became an enduring aspect of Rickles' life. He returned for Toy Story 3 in 2010, followed by Story 2 in 1999. In spite of his death in 2017, in some way, he made a reappearance in the 2019 film Toy Story 4. Along the way, he provided the voice of the character in Disney films, seasonal specials, and theme parks. Games. He recorded more than 750 lines on a single ride. He spent more money. More than 35 hours in the booth, forcing his voice so hard that he was unable to talk afterwards. However, he continued to return. Even he always responded yes when they called him when his health was deteriorating. He failed to notice it, as labor, that small toy, was his favorite. Rickles' approach remained the same for fiction. After reading the sentences, he began to improvise. His quips were quick and unvarnished, much like when he was a stand-up comedian. Pixar adored it. The animation was molded to fit his voice. The script left out the majority of Mr. Potato Head's greatest scenes. They resulted from Rickles' authenticity. Behind the scenes, the offending man in person, everyone on stage was gracious and modest. The animator's eye was astounded by his sweetness. In addition to being humorous, the character felt tactful. Following Rickles' death in April 2017, Pixar crew and fans were heartbroken. His Toy Story 4 recordings were still unfinished. However, his family didn't want his persona to vanish. Thus, the sound experts at Pixar combed through data from video games, vintage takes, amusement park clips, and decades worth of recordings. They assembled enough conversation to sustain Mr. Potato Head. In the last, he doesn't say much throughout the movie, but Rickles is in every syllable. The film concludes with honoring him. It was a subdued yet impactful way to part ways. Even the Rickles refused to slow down despite his deteriorating health. The same year that Headied, he continued to organize performances. Regis Philbin and him were set to meet in May, only a month after his death. He even attempted to reschedule the dates the year, wishing for a speedy recovery. In February, he informed reporters that Heat 90 I felt fine and had no intention of stopping. In the background, he was also working on an AARP television project. He just never gave up. He passed away at home in Century City, a few weeks before turning 91, surrounded by family. His spouse, he had known Barbara for 52 years. Larry, his only son, had passed away back in 2011. Additionally, the family requested that contributions be directed to Los Angeles Children's Hospital Larry Rickles Endowment Fund. Following his passing, the tributes disclose him that most people were surprised at. He was dubbed comedy's Mount by Jerry Seinfeld. Rushmore, his best buddy, Bob Newhart, described him as the most kind man he'd ever been aware. While discussing him live on the air, Jimmy Kimmel broke down in tears. The individual known for using humor to tear people apart, he turned out to have a big heart. According to friends and admirers, he was incredibly devoted, kind, and giving. He made a donation to numerous causes and provided behind-the-scenes support to other comics. He allowed time and helped collect funds for children's hospitals and donated to Jewish charity. He helped nearly everyone he knew, but he also made fun of everyone. His daughter Mindy Rickles has made a concerted effort to ensure that his true identity is remembered. She has contributed to the creation of displays, shared vintage videos, and shared the backstories of Thedjux. He was more than a comedian, she claims. He was a grandfather, a father, and someone who had a strong concern for people. Sharing that aspect of him has become her mission. Due to the fact that while Don Rickles will always be regarded as the world's funniest insult comedian, his greatest perhaps his legacy reflects his deep concern